Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming. My name is Skylar Zander. I'm the State Director for Americans for Prosperity here in Florida. And while we're a nationwide organization, we are chaptered and based here in Florida. And we have over 40 full-time staffers, 8 offices across the great state of Florida. And what we do every single day is make sure that citizens' voices are heard, whether it's at the door or making sure that we're connecting to them, to members of Congress, the Florida Cabinet, and the Florida Legislature. It's an honor to be brought here today to support CFO Ingoglia in his endeavor to try to uncover as much wasteful spending as possible. Being able to index things, making sure that local governments are held accountable is paramount to Florida's future and how we're going to continue to attract the best businesses to come here. Looking at inflation and population is crucial and a good barometer and a good start to start looking deeper as to how local governments are spending. And so it's an honor to be here. CFO Ingoglia has been somebody who's been in the trenches forever, starting out, touring the state, focusing on government gone wild at the time, focusing on making sure that Congress was held accountable, and then being elected to the Florida House himself, being able to look at the state budget, being able to run a portion of the state budget as a committee chairman, and then moving on to the Senate, where he focused on insurance and banking in the Senate. So to have somebody who has truly been in the trenches, somebody who understands budgeting as not only a small business owner, but also as a legislator, somebody that understands what county commissioners and others individuals across the state deal with on a day-to-day basis is critical. And so we thank him for his hard work, his dedication, and his focus on the taxpayers of Florida. This isn't a Republican or a Democratic issue. It's a local government issue. It's a local spending issue. And it's something that has to be addressed. If we want long-term tax cuts like property tax cuts or tax cuts to vehicle registrations or other opportunities and items, we've got to address spending at every level of government. And so with that, thank you so much, and please welcome Chief Financial Officer Blaise Ingoglia.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you for the kind words. And actually, it sort of reminds me, and sometimes I forget how I actually got started in this. So for the people who haven't been watching what we've been doing over the past 20 years or so, calling out government wasteful spending is nothing new. I actually did this, started in the mid-2000s when we saw the rise in property values, the rise in property taxes. Everyone was revolting. We wound up getting an additional homestead exemption. We'll talk a little about that. But the first thing I was doing was I started realizing that property tax bills starting to come in. And if I had a lot that I owned, a building lot that I owned in Hernando County, that would normally be $150 a year. I started realizing after 2 years that building lot, the taxes was $600. And I said, how did it go from 150 to 600? I said, I was always told that government needed this money for services to their constituents. And I said, what services does a lot have? So there was a disconnect. So I started learning about local government budgets, and I started realizing that government, if they say they're being good fiscal stewards of your dollars, they're probably not. So over the better part of 20 years, I started learning about local government budgets, what they do, the different parts of the budget, what they pay for, how they're funded. And I coined the phrase back then, government gone wild, because government was indeed going wild with our property tax dollars. And I will tell you that, unfortunately, government is going wild with our tax dollars again. Affordability is a very big issue here in the state of Florida, and that's why this property tax issue is first and foremost, and that's why it is incumbent upon the legislature to put something very aggressive on the ballot in November so we can vote for our own property tax relief, because it is very clear to me that local governments are not going to offer property tax relief themselves. It's going to have to come from the voters. So good morning. It is a great day to be in the great state of Florida. I am Chief Financial Officer Blaise Ingoglia. Again, I want to thank Schuyler Zander from the State Director for Americans for Prosperity for being here and introducing and the support for what we're doing. I also want to give a big warm welcome to a good friend of mine, Sheriff Staley. Thank you for everything that you do in our communities, all the sheriffs, including you, keeping everyone safe. So I appreciate that so much. We have always stood up for law enforcement. We always will stand up for our law enforcement partners. We're also joined by Mayor of Palm Coast, Mike Norris, Commissioner Carney, Commissioner Richardson, Palm Coast City Councilman Ty Miller, Councilman Dave Sullivan. And good to see you, sir. And Flagler County School Board member Will Fury. Where is Will? Well, that is an awesome name. That is like UFC fighter name. That is awesome. A couple of things before we start going through the presentation. I want to talk about influence. Influence over budgets, influence over the political process, influence over what happens here in Florida. Lobbyists are everywhere. You have large organizations in Tallahassee, in the federal government. They hire lobbyists, they hire government affairs people to protect their interests. Now, you also have large Fortune 500 companies that are out there. They're hiring lobbyists, they're hiring government affairs people. Their job is to protect their interests. Government itself, you guys are all paying, part of your tax dollars are paying to employ lobbyists and government affairs people to protect government's interests. Very few people are protecting the taxpayers' interests. And that's what I want everyone here to view me as a lobbyist for the taxpayers, a taxpayer advocate to say that no, government is growing too quickly, government is spending too much, government is taxing too much. So my job here is to lobby on behalf of the taxpayers and show that tax reform is needed. Government is growing way too quickly and it's becoming way too expensive, and it is a main problem that we're having here in the state of Florida regarding affordability. So I know a lot of local officials are either running for re-election, or candidates are running on the issue of housing affordability. The best way to give people an affordable home is to reduce their property taxes, because the last time I checked, that was part of the payment. But it's unfortunate that we have to do events like these and sort of shine the light and inform people of just how much money local governments are wasting, excessively spending compared to inflation and population, and make the case that no, governments are taking too much money. They can cut, they can offer property tax relief. And we're going to prove that here today. Since entering this office as CFO, I have been on a mission to highlight this excessive and wasteful spending, to show that real property tax reform is not only needed, but achievable. And so far, across 15 local governments that we have done these exercise on, we have uncovered $2.02 billion, and that is with a B, of excessive wasteful spending in just one single year. That is not a cumulative total, that is 1 year alone. Some of the highlights. And with these highlights, I want everyone to recognize that these are a mix of red and blue counties and cities, because this is not a partisan issue. This is a protecting the taxpayer issue. I am not here to protect one party over another party. What I am here for is to protect the taxpayer first and foremost. So let's go through some of these numbers. Orange County, $190 million worth of excessive and wasteful spending. Hillsborough County, $278 million. Broward County, deep blue, Broward County, $189 million. Jacksonville, City of Jacksonville, purple, half red, half blue, $199 million. Manatee County, deep red Manatee County, $112 million worth of wasteful and excessive spending last year. City of Miami, blue city, $94 million. Nassau County, just north of here, quickly growing county, $53 million of excessive and wasteful spending. Deep red also. Alachua County, deep blue, $84 million. Seminole County, purple county, $48 million. St. Petersburg, which is more blue than red, $49 million. Citrus County, we did earlier this week. That was for $39 million, deep red also, in my backyard, part of my old Senate district. And one of the worst that we've seen in terms of raw dollars, Palm Beach County, $344 million worth of excessive and wasteful spending. Now, That is a lot of big numbers, a lot of waste, but here's the thing. I've told people that I don't care if you're a red city, red county, blue city, blue county, if you're going to waste money, I'm going to call you out. We're going to hold these press conferences and we are going to call you out. But what I also said is that if I find a jurisdiction that is actually spending money pretty wisely, I'm going to praise them. And that is what happened with Deep Blue City of Orlando. They only wasted $22 million worth of accessible wasteful spending, but they have a pretty large budget. So 22 million as a percentage of their budget was relatively small. It was a little bit more than a rounding error. So the most frugal, fiscally conservative jurisdiction that we've seen so far is the city of Orlando. I'm not here to protect the party. I'm here to call balls and strikes on behalf of the taxpayers. Now, that $2.2 billion that we went over, that is a B, that belongs in the wallets and the bank accounts of the taxpayers, not in the hands of government. We believe that $2.02 billion could be given back to the people in property tax cuts, and that could have been easily made with zero cuts to service. Now, government is going to tell you there's no way. They're going to have to cut service, and I'm going to show you here why that's not necessarily true, and we'll run through those numbers. But I want to be clear on this, especially to the cameras in the back, the reporters that I know are here, and people listening to me on the live stream. Local governments are going to try to excuse away their spending and convince you that they need every single dime that they need. And I'm here to tell you that they are going to try to scare you. They are going to try to use the boogeyman of long 911 times. They're going to say that they're not going to be able to hire fire. They're not going to be able to hire police. And they're going to have to eliminate essential services, which is kind of funny because if a local government says that in order to cut, we have to go to Sheriff Staley and say, hey, you're going to have to fire some deputies, or we're going to go to the police chiefs, and thank you for being here, and say that we're going to have to let go some fire. No. The first rule of government is to protect its people. And you do that by hiring the first responders and keeping the first responders in order to protect the people. So if a government says that in order to cut, those are the things that they have to cut, what does that mean? Their priorities are screw up. They're saying that those are the first things that they're looking to cut. We're saying that you should never cut fire and police. So I want everyone to remember that. They're going to try to wage a campaign. We're already seeing it. Local governments and their employees and the people in their government affairs, their lobbyists are already out there trying to set the predicate, saying that they can't cut government whatsoever. There's no way that they're going to cut government. They're actually going to wage a PR campaign on the airwaves, on TV and radio, saying that they can't cut a dime out of their bloated budgets. They're going to wage a campaign against you using your own tax dollars. Because remember, nothing happens in government without taxes being allocated to that government. So your government is taking in your tax dollars and turning around and lobbying against you, the people who are actually funding government. That is pernicious, and I want everyone to understand that. So when, remember that when local governments come out and say they're going to have to cut fire and police, that is nowhere near accurate. Those are not the things that they should be looking at cutting first. They should be looking at cutting their bloated budgets and how large their governments have grown over the last 6 years. But instead, unfortunately, local governments are taking this money and expanding government. They're expanding the administrative state. And when government expands, it becomes more bureaucratic, less efficient, and more cumbersome. Now, another thing that is going to happen, unfortunately, big government apologists don't care. They want to keep every dime that they have. And you are going to see Sunday editorials written about everything that we're presenting here, trying to poke holes in our numbers, trying to malign the messenger. They're going to do everything they possibly can with the widest audience that they can to try to not get people to understand what we're having, not buying into what's going on here. And this is part of the scam, pulling the wool over the people's eyes that government needs all this money because they don't. Now, they're going to also try to refute our numbers, which they can't. I will tell you, everything that we are presenting here, all the numbers, all the calculations come directly from government's budget itself. They're going to have their big government apologists write those opinion pieces also, And they're also going to claim that our methodology doesn't make sense. But it does. I want everyone to look at this board right here. Schuyler, also from Americans Prosperity, said that one of the best ways to contextualize how large government is growing, or a better way is how much government should only grow, is compared to inflation and population. This is a quote from James Madison Institute. This is a conservative think tank, fiscal conservative think tank. At James Madison Institute, we believe that the FAFO methodology, the methodology that derived our numbers today, similar to what has been enacted in law in states like Colorado and Utah, is one of the most effective tools to demonstrate the need for tax relief for Floridians and to rein in government spending. This is our methodology right here. We take the base budget, we add inflation and population, and that is acceptable budget growth. So anything over what we think is acceptable budget growth, we are deeming as wasteful and excessive, because government should have never had the revenue in the first place. They should have never spent it in the second place, which means you should have never been taxed on it in the third place. And I think that is very, very important. But I also want to go back to this board, because you're going to have people coming out and say that our methodology doesn't make sense, it's not used anywhere else. In 1993, Colorado specifically voted into their constitution a taxpayer bill of rights. And the taxpayer bill of rights says basically this, is that government cannot grow faster than inflation plus population. And if it does, you actually have to give the money back to the taxpayers. Now, say what you want about Colorado, but I will tell you this. Colorado is the poster child for fiscal conservatism and keeping government in check, because it is enshrined in their constitution. So we take the same methodology and we apply it to local governments to contextualize how large these governments have grown. But that also means is that when we take a base budget and we add in inflation and population to the number to find out where the government should reasonably be, what does that mean? That means we included already in our number, in our calculations, extra money for fire rescue and police because of population growth. We've included raises for law enforcement and general government employees, also because of our methodology. And we've also included extra money because of increased costs. We've accounted for everything that a local government should or would need in order to deliver services to the taxpayers. What should scare you all here today is that Flagler blew past those numbers. Flagler County still exceeded inflation and population growth, and we believe that they have excessively and wastefully spent your tax dollars to the tune of $59.8 million. Now, that's a large number, but this doesn't tell the full story. This, we believe, is wasteful and excessive spending on behalf of the general fund budget. This is money that should have never collected if not for a rise in property taxes. They took the extra money, they showed zero fiscal constraint and just spent it and continue to spend it year after year after year. One of my problems with wasteful spending is that spending, especially at the local level, has become so egregious that it's almost become normal. And nobody even knows what egregious spending is anymore because they see it. It only when somebody from the outside comes in and contextualizes it and shows it to people in layman's terms, they go, well, that's pretty excessive. That number is excessive. So let's go over a little bit of the methodology. As you can see, base budget plus inflation and population. The numbers I'm about to tell you, I'm constantly saying when I do these presentations, I'm constantly saying that I have to go back and double check the numbers because some of these numbers are eye-popping. On a percentage basis, I can clearly say that Flagler County is the worst that I have seen out of any of the counties in the state of Florida. It's not even close. Now, on social media, I don't know if the people are in the room or some of the people who keep on tagging me on social media and say, you have to check Flagler, you have to check Flagler, you're going to be surprised with you. And we get that all the time, but when I checked Flagler, boy, was I surprised. I could not believe it. So these are the numbers. What we do, how we do this is we start off the 2019-2020 base budget. That is our base budget. That was the last budget before COVID. The last time government budget were sane, as if they were ever sane. But that's our base budget. We took that number and we indexed forward for inflation and population to see where the budget would have reasonably or should have reasonably be, and then we compared it to what it actually is. That's where we get that number of 59 million. But these are the numbers, the raw numbers. I don't often go over these, but in 2019-2020, the general fund portion of the budget that is funded by your property taxes, was 92.5 million. Last year in 25-26, it was 202.7 million. That's an astounding amount of growth, which means that on a percentage basis, Flagler is unfortunately the winner for the worst spender so far. $110 million extra in those 6 years for an increase in a budget of almost 120%. No, I have been around this state and I have been telling people that local government budgets have been increasing anywhere between 60 and 120%. Here's your 120%. That is a huge increase. Now, to be fair, the population in Flagler County has also increased a lot. The population has gone up in that same time frame, 6 years, 32,564 people, for an increase of 29.4%. That is a large increase on a percentage basis, right? So you would expect budgets to go up, especially fire and police, in order to accommodate for that. It's just normal. But let's go back to what I was saying, is that we're accounting for inflation and population. So on an adjustment level, when we adjusted for inflation and population, the number that we came up with which should have been an acceptable budget was higher than almost every other county, because the adjustment was larger. You had a larger population. They still blew past that number by 59 million. That's how you get $110 million extra in budget over 6 years. For each new resident who moved to Flagler County, the general fund budget increased by around $3,400. For every family of 4 that moved in to the county, the budget increased a little over $13,540. That doesn't make sense. And for people in the private sector, it really doesn't make sense, because the more work that you have in the private sector, what does the private sector do? Now, I get it, government is going to run like the private sector. I wish it would. It would cost a lot less. But in the private sector, if you had more business, you would do a couple of things. You would probably hire more people, just enough to take care of the business that you have, assuming that the business would continue. Or you would make sure that they would be more productive in order to do that. Not government. They just keep on hiring and hiring and hiring. So if your government wasn't efficient to begin with, and then you hire more, do you all of a sudden you think you're going to become more efficient just because you're throwing more money at the problem? It's unfortunate, but that's what government thinks. And that, unfortunately, is not reality. So that is a lot of money for new people coming in, and it doesn't make any sense. So to recap, according to our calculations, Flagler County is the worst on a percentage basis of the increase of their budget. It's not even close. I think they're about a good 20% over the nearest competitor, for worse. And according to our calculations, again, $59 million has been collected when it shouldn't have been collected, showing zero fiscal constraint, and overtaxing, overspending, and wastefully spending. So remember what I said before, that $59 million belongs in the hands of the taxpayers, not in the hands of government. And we believe that money should have been never collected and should have been given back. So how do you give it back? You give it back by lowering the millage rate, which is what should have been done. So with the calculations, we believe that this past year, the county commission could have reduced their mills by 1.4 and still had all of the money that they needed in order to deliver services here in Flagler County. So what does that mean in layman's terms? That means if you live in Flagler and you had a home that was assessed at $400,000, you would have enjoyed about a $558 a year tax break. That's just the general fund portion of the budget. This does not count the school portion of the budget. Don't get me started on school budgets because I think they are some of the most wasteful spenders in government. But if you have a home that was tax assessed at $500,000, you would save about $700 a year. If you have a home that was tax assessed at $600,000, you would save about $838 a year. This is real money put back in the hands of the taxpayers, not in the hands of government bureaucrats who have shown time and time over that they do nothing but expand government and make it more expensive for you all. Like I said before, housing affordability is a big issue. And I get very frustrated when I see elected officials and candidates run on a platform of affordable housing, especially if you're already an elected official running for re-election. We have to do more for our housing affordability. We have to do more for affordable housing. But the second we show them the path to create more affordable housing, which is reduce their own budget by reducing property taxes, they're not interested. So you cannot, on one hand, run on a platform of affordable housing and then at the same time be the problem and one of the reasons why housing is unaffordable. That doesn't make you a good steward of taxpayer dollars. I'm sorry, that makes you a hypocrite. And that is super frustrating to me. Governments are wasting money left and right, crying poor, and consistently wanting more and more. Everyone in this room should know that property taxes are not going up because of essential services. They're going up because bureaucrats and politicians think that you are an endless ATM. Anytime they need more money, they'll put a tax referendum on the ballot. They will get their partners in the community to help run campaigns to get it passed. And you know what? Don't get me wrong, some communities need some of the money, but what I'm saying is they have more than enough money. If they reallocated and reprioritized, you would get a lot of things done in this state. You have roads that need to be repaved. Next time you're on a road here in Flagler County and it's not paved and it's bumpy and there's potholes, I want you to think of that $59 million. The next time when you're at a traffic light and you are backed up a half a mile waiting for the turn signal, I want you to think of the $59 million. So when local governments say that they don't have the money, partially true. They don't have the money because they've been wasting it. They actually had more than enough money. They chose not to give it back to you, or they chose not to invest it in the communities to make the communities better. What they're actually doing it with it is hiring government employees, administrative people, and expanding government. Now, the problem with hiring government employees is you make government a lot bigger, and then it becomes harder to rein in. There's going to be a lot of people who were hired by local governments over the last 5 or 6 years that are probably going to have pink slips over the next 2 or 3 years. Because the people of the state of Florida has had enough. I mean, look at the tax base. The budget has gone up 120%. Has your lives gotten 120% better here in Flagler County? If your budget went up 80%, has your lives gotten 80% better? You know, and that's one of the reasons why we index for inflation and population. Why should government be able to, if they think they need money, which they don't, be able to go out and extract more money from you when you're not getting big pay raises? It doesn't make sense. So I am totally committed to be a taxpayer advocate and a lobbyist on behalf of you all. I'm not going away. I'm going to be in this position for another 8 years. So if you think I'm going away and all these are going to stop, you are sorely mistaken. In fact, people thought that this was going to be a month thing, and then I wasn't going to. I've been doing these for the better part of 7 months now. I'm not going to stop, even with property tax reform. If you think just because of property tax reform I'm going to go away, what do you think, I'm going to give governments a free pass? Heck no. I'm here to protect you guys. I'm not here to protect the government. It's unfortunate, but some people get elected to government because they want to solve a problem, never even asking themselves, should the problem be solved in the first place? Should it be an issue that government is involved at all? And I know a lot of really good people who run for office and mean well, but then they get co-opted by the system. People, when you get elected to office, you should be a barrier between the taxpayer and government. I've seen way too many people be on the side of the government and very few people be on the side of the taxpayer. You know, another thing is, going around and doing these, I'm always told that, well, aren't you going to piss off elected officials? Yeah. But you know what the end of the day is? I walk down the street now and I have people literally stopping me, thanking me for what I'm doing because somebody is finally shining a light on this stuff. So if I make some enemies along the way, it's okay. Those are the right enemies because every day of the week and twice on Sunday, I'll have the taxpayers' back. And I will always have your back with this. So with that, more than happy to answer any questions from the press. Oh, come on. Okay, all right, so let's play this exercise. If there's no questions from the press, let's do this. I'm going to predict government's answers for you. You're going to go to and say, what do you say about Ingoglia's presentation, right? And you're going to have a local government official and say, yeah, that's great, but it doesn't work in the real world. Really? Colorado and Utah would beg to differ. This happens in the real world. There's no excuses. They're going to say, but we have to expand roads and build roads, not paid for by property taxes, paid for by developers or should be paid for by developers in the form of impact fees. I cannot tell you how many of these exercises and the people who should know how government works all of a sudden shoots off something to the press and says that Ingoglia is wrong because of these reasons. And we would look at all those reasons with like, yeah, that's all fine and dandy, except none of them are paid for by the general fund. They're going to say inflation is more. The price of concrete has gone up. You don't buy concrete out of the general fund. You buy that off of the capital improvement fund. I know where the dead bodies are buried. I know what government is going to say in advance. So my question to the people, the reporters in the back that are reporting on this, is that you're going to do your due diligence. You're going to do your job. You are going to go and get quotes from local elected officials, and you get quotes from county administrators, city managers, or whatever. Tell me what the quotes are before you all print it. Because I'm going to tell you how much those answers are BS. But it doesn't matter to them. Not the press. Well, some it may not matter. I don't know. But to the local government, they don't care. They're just going to put out as much false information as possible in the hopes that people are uneducated so they can go and try to keep their budget. Here's another thing. A lot of the talk about property tax reform right now, actually this is good because I want everyone to understand this also. This is the reason why this is such an issue. The original homestead exemption, when it was put on the ballot, was $25,000, right? At that time when it was put on the ballot and it was passed into our Constitution, the average home price in the state of Florida was $75,000. It shielded a third of your home from property taxation. So what happened mid-2000s? You had a run-up in prices, a run-up in property taxes. The local government took all this money and spent it like drunken sailors. And then we all revolted and we got an additional homestead exemption on the ballot. So the homestead exemption that we enjoy now, because we're really not enjoying it anymore, works like this. The first $25,000 is exempt. The next $25,000 is taxed. The next $25,000 after that is exempt, but there's an exemption for the exemption for school boards. It's not a full 50. It's more like 39, 40,000. The problem is that is only shielding on average about 9% of your home. This is why this is such a big issue, and this is why local government needs to be reined in when it comes to spending your tax dollars. You have counties like Flagler, which are growing, yes. We're already accounting for the growth, and they're overspending. So my ask again to the reporters is that when you get these responses, these canned responses, which will probably be absolutely wrong, contact our office. We'll show them while they're wrong, because I will not have government pull the wool over the eyes of the taxpayers. So with that, if there are no questions, I appreciate your attention to this matter. Just keep on knowing that I'm going to shine a light on wasteful spending. I'm going to keep on doing it because I'm here for you, not for government. Appreciate you guys. Thank you all for coming.